Welcome back, guys. Our first episode is not going to be out for another week or two, and because of that, we wanted to share with you guys a preview of what our episodes are going to look like, some of the conversations that we'll be having as part of this podcast. Now, one topic in particular that we wanted to cover that we're not going to get to talk about before the first episode comes out is a pretty interesting election that's happening in Kansas right now, and that is the primary to determine who the Republican nominee for the Senate election in November in Kansas is going to be. There's a pretty interesting set of candidates, and we wanted to get a chance to talk about them, to preview what that race is going to look like, and give you guys a chance to see what some of our deeper dives into the 2020 election are going to look like. So we're going to play our intro sequence really quick, and then we'll get right into the discussion. Welcome back to Clear Cut Politics. I'm Cole Bauer, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Ian Wooldridge. Today, we are going to be talking about Kansas politics, specifically the Senate election that is coming up in November. It's coinciding, obviously, with the general election. Now, Kansas has a reputation for being a ruby red state. They have not elected a Democrat to the Senate since 1932. However, they have a chance to elect a Democrat for the first time since then this fall due to a particularly awful set of Republican candidates, and because the Democratic nominee, Barbara Bollier, is a former Republican who recently switched to become a Democrat, and she has bipartisan appeal and could likely peel off some moderate Republican voters. However, we want to focus on those Republican candidates today. There are some pretty interesting ones in the field. I'm going to run through them really quick for you, and then Ian and I are going to discuss all of them and talk about the implications of this race and any other effects that it might have on nationwide politics, on Kansas state politics, and on the future of the Republican Party. So without further ado, the candidates for this race are Roger Marshall. He's a representative who represents the western half of Kansas in the United States House of Representatives. He's been in Congress for 4 or 5 years now, and he has a reputation as one of those establishment Republicans who's probably more moderate, toes the party line, and is just behind Trump because Trump rules the Republican Party. The other main frontrunner candidate is Chris Kobach, who is famous for losing Kansas Republicans the governor's seat in 2018. He lost that election to Laura Kelly because of his racist, xenophobic views, and he is taking another shot at winning elective office, trying to win this Senate seat. Now, there are two big wild cards in this race other than those two frontrunners, and that is number one, the first one is former Chiefs defensive end Dave Lindstrom, who is polling somewhere in between 5 and 15% in most polls, and could take away a significant chunk of the vote from those two main frontrunners. The other wild card is Kansas City plumber Bob Hamilton. Now, any of our Kansas City listeners obviously recognize that name because he used to own the plumbing company Bob Hamilton Plumbing. He recently sold the company, but is using his substantial personal fortune to bankroll a campaign involving spending millions of ads blanketing the state to try and win as many voters as possible. We'll take a look at some of those ads later on in our discussion. But Ian, let's talk about these candidates and see what we have to think about them.
Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should start with Hamilton. I think we need to get all the jokes.
All right, yeah. We need to get the jokes out of the way. And many of now, obviously, we want to make it clear that Bob Hamilton, he is essentially a Trump mini-me, and he has said a lot of pretty bad stuff over the years or over the course of his campaign that we do not agree with. We want to make it clear, however, we are not making light of anything that he stands for and how bad those views are, but considering that he is someone that we know is the friendly neighborhood plumber, he is a guy that we would never expect to be saying these things. And as such, it's kind of funny to us that he has decided to publicly announce himself as an acolyte of Donald Trump when the president's political fortunes are quickly falling. So we're going to play an ad for you really quickly that he ran recently and is still running. It is pretty controversial due to one of his comments at the end of the video, and you'll see what that is, but we're going to play it for you really quickly and then discuss.
Why vote plumber electrical businessman Bob Hamilton?
I'm Trump's biggest fan. I'll drive Washington nuts. Jumpstart the economy. Unplug the career politicians. Drain the swamp. Clamp down on China. Electrify the wall. Quit crying, liberals. It's just a joke. I'm Bob Hamilton. I approve this message because politics as usual is the real joke. It's time to send in the plumber to drain the swamp.
All right, that was Puns, produced by the Bob Hamilton for Senate campaign. Ian, what are your thoughts on this ad?
I must say that I've seen that ad so many times at this point. It's honestly, not that I have a favorite Bob Hamilton ad, but I think that one's either number one or number two, and I think we'll show the other.
We'll be showing the other top one pretty quickly, and that one is quite a doozy too.
But I find it comical, and it's scary that this man is even saying and joking about these things, but I find it comical that he is. He's putting all of his eggs in the basket of Donald Trump, and we see that Donald Trump is slowly declining or fastly declining, depending on what
popular. He's still popular amongst Republicans, and that might be why he's hitching himself to Trump's wagon so quickly to try and curry the favor of that Trump base that exists across the state of Kansas. But it's just fascinating. In particular, I can't believe, the whole electrify the wall, quit crying, liberals, it's just a joke. That's not a joke. Electrifying the wall and it's just unbelievable. And we can obviously have this discussion about the issue of immigration and how most of these people, the vast majority of them, are not criminals trying to smuggle drugs into this country, but are rather refugees fleeing from gang violence, domestic violence, political violence. But the fact that, you're able to make those types of jokes is just unbelievable. And obviously, maybe those Trump Republicans think it's funny and it'll sway their vote towards Bob Hamilton. But for, two progressives like us who believe in human rights and feel very strongly about this issue of immigration, and I hope that I'm correct in speaking for you as well, that we really don't think it's funny to joke about such a serious issue as this, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You are speaking quite well for me. I'm sure that in another podcast we will talk about deeply immigration, but I just like to put today that immigration is something that too many Americans hold such a tight grip on, that they're so fearful of it, when the basis of our entire country is immigration, and everyone needs to just breathe and take a second to just think about how big our country is. Wyoming has plenty of room for people to come. I'm not saying that they're all going to flock to Wyoming, but we have plenty of room to continue spreading out. It's not like we're a tightly dense packed country.
We are going to move on to the next ad from Bob Hamilton, and this one is titled "It's a Right, Not an Option." Now, just from that title, I'm sure you can guess what it's about.
Well, First Amendment rights, yeah.
Yeah, your First Amendment rights. First Amendment's not an option, pal. I get to say whatever I want. But we're playing "It's a Right, Not an Option," and let's see what we think of it.
I'm Bob Hamilton. Second Amendment is not an option. It's a right. And if the liberal gun grabbers want to take away my semi-automatic, I have one message for them. Come and take it.
So that was It's a Right, Not an Option. And I think we need to get the obvious undertone of this ad out of the way straight away. And what is it 100%, Ian?
Pandering
Absolutely.
all the way hardcore to just that one small group of the Republican Party that finds the Second Amendment the most important amendment. Which, let's think about it this way: if it was the most important amendment, wouldn't it be number one?
It would be, yep.
So I mean, it's just hardcore pandering, which all politicians do at some point. But as Bob Hamilton, as a new politician, he's jumping out of the gate and just putting. Sorry to use the same analogy twice, but he's putting with that single ad, he's just putting all of his eggs in that basket. He has no chance of getting any moderate votes with an ad like that, because most moderates see that gun control is a decent thing and protects people. It's not taking away guns. It's not. No one, or very few people on the left are saying that we want to take your guns. I'm personally not saying that. Would I be against it? Not 100% against it, but I'm not saying that actively. I'm saying that we need regulation. And we have regulation in everything. Seatbelts are an example of regulation that didn't always exist, and then we enforced it. So,
and if for any of you out there watching or listening right now who are like, oh, he's not pandering, he just believes strongly about the Second Amendment, I'd like you to rewind right now to the first ad, and look at his dad jokes. Now he's talking in his normal, moderate timbre of a voice, and then go back to the second ad and see how he has visibly deepened his voice and he's trying to sound tougher. He's got his safety glasses and his headphones on, and he's trying to show off to all those NRA members across the state of Kansas. This is obvious pandering, and Ian, you said that it was pandering to that small section of Republican voters who care deeply about this issue. I would dare to say that yes, only a small section of Republican voters care so deeply about this issue, and they don't want to get their guns taken away, and they're fearful of even common sense gun regulations, like expanding universal background checks and other safety measures. But the Republican Party, because of the influence of the NRA, and because of how critical those voters can be in low turnout primary elections, opposing gun control has become one of the biggest issues for the Republican Party, because they view it as essential due to the money that they get from taking that stance and how essential it is to make sure they're keeping their jobs.
For sure, it's the fastest ticket out of the Republican Party is to say that you support gun control. Either that or that you don't like Trump or say something bad about Trump.
Moving on to Marshall and Kobach, obviously these two are obviously the dueling wings of the Kansas Republican Party. There's a conflict within in Kansas, as there is across the nation in Republican circles, has been for years, over whether things should go hard right conservative or whether they should be more moderate. Obviously, the conservatives have the upper hand because Donald Trump is in office. And if I may, I'd like to segue this into the fact that I think that this primary signifies kind of a preview of what we're going to see after Donald Trump leaves office, of what the Republican Party is going to face. And I'd like to see if you agree with me on this, Ian. But I'd say that there are probably three main lanes for Republicans at this point, and what they're going to do if Trump leaves office. There are the Trump mini-me's like Bob Hamilton, who are going to repeat anything that he says, and they're just crazy, and maybe they could turn out on top because they have the control of the Trump base, and that's obviously going to continue to be very important for the Republican Party going forward. There are, some people like to call them the Trumpist intellectuals. We're talking Josh Hawley, Chris Kobach, highly educated Republicans who are trying to take Trump's ideas and turn them into a coherent intellectual policy set of ideas, which is obviously very difficult to do because one does not associate intellectualism and Donald Trump very often. But they're trying their best. And obviously, they've gotten a huge boost from the Silicon Valley CEO, Peter Thiel, who has given millions of dollars to campaigns similar to Hawley's and Kobach's across the United States. And then there are the Roger Marshalls of the Republican Party. You know, your typical just mainstream Republicans who are establishment. They hitched themselves to Trump because he was the big thing. And even now, some of them are starting to flock away from him, but they're going to walk away from Trump and just try and go back to being just normal Republicans and expect us to, not remember that they propped up this, wannabe dictator for 4 years. So that is the struggle, in my view, that the Republican Party faces. Are we going to go with these Trump mini-me's? Are we going to go with these guys who are trying to sell themselves as the smarter version of Donald Trump, who are going to try and articulate this more intellectual Trumpism? Or are we going to go back to the same old for the Republican Party? So what are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree with those theories that we're just going to see either. I like how you put it, Trumpism. Almost, it's like a religion of theirs almost. But I think the more important thing that we need to look at is, what does this mean for the other parties? Of course, Democrats being the main one, but what is this going to look like for libertarians? Are they going to, the Libertarian Party actually going to grow because of this? Because there's going to be a large part of America who doesn't like this new Trumpism Republican Party. So we might actually see the Libertarian Party grow. And in my personal opinion, I could be mistaken after Trump leaves office. It could still be as small as it is. But we see that, Jo Jorgensen, not to bring topic to another candidate today, but she is growing heavily in the polls, which is alarming for us Democrats, because we would like to see Joe Biden, of course, win in November. And we don't want to see another repeat of 2016, where the third-party votes weren't super large, but they were just enough that either people voted for anyone besides Hillary, and that really just ended up being a vote for Trump, or they didn't vote at all. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this looks, because these Republicans who did prop them up need to be held accountable by their party and by the other parties. And we might just see that this could be the decline of the Republican Party.
So Ian, as we close out the Kansas segment, what would you say your prediction is for this election? Who do you think will be the Republican nominee? And what do you think, if you want to provide what you think a rough vote total or so will be, then you can do so. If you want to provide any other commentary to close out, then that's great.
Yeah, so what I'm leaning towards right now, or what I'm seeing happening, is that Marshall will either take it all and it won't even be a fight between Kobach, or it will be a very, very close. And I know that seems a little ironic that I'm saying it's either going to be all Marshall or it's going to be close. But the reason why I say it's close is because we have Bob Hamilton, and we have all these other candidates too, who are going to make it very close for the two candidates that are really running. I don't have Kansas's population off the top of my head, nor do I know how many Republicans are in the state of Kansas.
Well,
I'm sure.
Talking about percentages,
Okay. I think that realistically, Bob Hamilton will probably end up with close to 20%. Mm-hmm. I think that and then probably another 15 to 20% will be any other candidate that we haven't listed. There's about 9 other candidates that we haven't even mentioned who are all polling less than 5%. or 2% in some of the
I'm
cases.
going to write this down. We're going to remember our predictions, and then
Right.
on August 4th, we can see who's closer.
And then I think that it's just going to be, it'll be close. It'll either be Kobach with, so what am I? I'm at 15 or 20 plus 20, so I'm at 40. So I got 60 left. So it's either going to be a 40-20 situation or like a 29-31 situation, which still means that Hamilton was very close with the numbers that I've thrown out there. So
yeah. So you think Kobach will get somewhere in between 21 and 31%, and you think Marshall will get somewhere in between 29 and 40%?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So I think that this one could go a number of ways, and I think that with primary elections like this, especially in the middle of the pandemic, they are low turnout. They are almost impossible to predict. But I think that, and we haven't had any statewide polling in over 2 months, but if I were to say today, I would say that we're probably going to see Chris Kobach get about 40% of the vote. I think we'll see Roger Marshall get about 25% of the vote. So that puts me at 65%. I think that Hamilton will get close to 20% of the vote. And I think that Dave Lindstrom will get 15% of the vote. And obviously, I'm not accounting for anyone else, but that's about the rough total that I'm expecting. I think that Chris Kobach will end up winning this. And that is obviously a boon to Barbara Bollier, because him or Bob Hamilton would be the best candidates for her to face in November. But she can beat Roger Marshall too, so it doesn't really make a difference.
very true.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Ian, and having us talk about the Kansas Senate primary. It is happening on August 4th, and we'll be keeping our eye on the results. Those numbers that we predicted, I'm going to hold on to them, and I'll put them in the captions of this video that we're putting out on Instagram and Twitter, and we'll find out who is more correct on Tuesday in determining who wins the Kansas Senate primary.
That we will.
All right.